Let me share with you the scripture reading today. It comes from the 17th chapter of Matthew. And as you may or may not realize, today is the Sunday of Transfiguration, when Jesus is taken into another realm, you might say, and presents this new understanding to his followers. Hear then the reading. It's in the bulletin if you would like to follow along. 6 days later, Jesus went up to the top of a mountain with Peter, James, and John. There, something spectacular happened. The face of Jesus began to glow and gleam and shine like the morning sun. His clothes gleamed too, bright white like sunlight on a new snowfall. He was, in a word, transfigured. Suddenly, there at the top of the mountain with Jesus were Moses and Elijah, and they talked to Jesus. Peter then said to Jesus, "Lord, how amazing it is that we are here. If you wish, I will build some shelter, 3 small tabernacles, for you, for Moses, and for Elijah." As Peter spoke, a bright cloud enveloped all of them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the 3 disciples heard this, they were terrified and fell to the ground. But Jesus came to them and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." A very well-known pastor, minister, teacher, writer from the United Methodist Church. His name is William Willimon. He has been seen as one of the most dynamic and influential ministers in our time. He grew up in South Carolina in the 60s and 70s. When he was a young man, he went to college. And one summer in the mid-60s, when he was there, he was born in 1946, he and a number of his fellow students, white students primarily, were invited to go on a field trip, if you will, down to the deep South. He had already had a good taste of racism in South Carolina, and now he was interested in what about this civil rights action and movement. Him and his fellow students decided they could go down there, like many were doing those summers, and make a real difference and change the world. They went down there and they found out quickly that their main assignment at the first was to get to know the people, get to know the culture, find out what was going on, not just in news headlines and textbooks, but what was really going on. He found himself getting to know people that he had never come across before. And one of the things that they did was they worshiped in a black church. Michelle did a great job last week sharing with us about the black gospel hymns. And Bill played, and it just inspired me at least of hearing this is so strong. These songs have such meaning and impact. He got a full dose of it. He also found out that the black church, especially down in the Deep South, they don't care about clocks. They're not done until they're done. And a lot of times they're not done until late in the afternoon on Sunday. It was a glorious experience, and he was growing by leaps and bounds, understanding that which he had never tasted before. And yet, by the 3rd and 4th Sunday of worship, a month being there, him and his group, they were getting a little antsy, a little anxious about what are we doing here? When are we going to get out there and make a difference? It's time for us to get on the streets and fix this. One of the elders of the black church overheard them speaking, and he just gently walked over and put his arms around some of them and said, "Boys," is primarily boys, "we've been doing this a whole lot longer than you have. And let me tell you, when you go out on that street, and when they turn loose the dogs on you, when they fire up the water cannons, And when you find yourself face down, that's when you better know who you are and why you're there. You better know who you are as a child of God. And you better know why you're there, because God has sent you. William Willimon would later years say that that was and remains the best advice he ever received. Who you are and why you're there. Worship is like that. Well, it reaffirms to help us reclaim who we are. That elder in the black church didn't make that up about being a child of God and what difference that makes. In the scriptures we hear about this love, this grace, this presence that we receive, this inheritance to which we are born anew, is that which nothing can spoil or wither or take away from us. That as a child of God, as we recognize and we reclaim that time and time again, we come to an understanding of who we are. Not as individuals out someplace on our own tangent, not as those who are alone trying to fight the world, not as those who have to rely on our own abilities, but as a child of God. I celebrate that part about our worship. I don't know if you do, but I do. Where we gather together, and sometimes we come as pretty broken. Maybe we have felt in our own ways, not as significant, but in our own ways, that the dogs have been loosed on us, and that the water cannons have been fired on us, and our life is not going the way we thought. And sometimes we do the best we can just to show up. Sometimes we do the best we can just to take that next step. And it's those kind of times when we need to hear a prayer by Michelle. We need to hear each other sharing joys and sorrows. We need to hear the music that we share and listen to Bill's playing and lifting our spirits. We need this time to be together. This time of worship, it truly is a time when we reclaim who we are. And we celebrate, we give thanks, we have gratitude that we are a child of God. Because sometimes when we're out on that street, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget. So we come to worship, do we not? So that it might rekindle that spark in us, that we know that fire that will never be extinguished. But there's another part to our time of worship, and this other part that the elder was alluding to, that when you go out on that street, as if, well, of course you will go out on that street. A wonderful writer, Anthony Robinson, wrote in a book a few years ago, Transforming Congregational Culture. And in this book he talked about worship as truly being that time, that moment, that experience when we dare, he used that word, where we dare to have the courage to come in the fullness of God's presence. Because some amazing things can happen when we do that. Fred Craddock, the wonderful Disciples of Christ preacher, teacher, he took that same thought and took it a little bit different, but the same direction, saying that when we allow ourselves to be in the full presence of God, it can be a little frightening. Annie Dillard, an American writer, author, she said that when you come into worship, the greeters, the ushers, shouldn't just hand out bulletins and a smile. They should hand out a hard hat and a life vest. Because you're getting ready to go on a ride, a wild ride. You see, there's both sides of that coin, isn't there? Not only coming here and reclaiming this love, this grace, this mercy that we experience as a child of God, but also setting the stage for now what's going to happen when we leave this place and attempt and do the best we can to make a difference. Well, did you hear the scripture reading this morning about the transfiguration of Jesus? I think there was something else going on too. But let's talk about the first part. If you follow the storyline that Jesus has taken Peter and James and John up to the mountaintop. Now, if you back up just a few inches, so to speak, you're going to find out that up to this time, Jesus has been pretty popular. That he's come into these villages and they've said, oh, please heal us. Thank you. Oh, please show us a miracle. Thank you. He's had a lot of popularity, and for a follower, it hasn't been that difficult yet. They've kind of been riding this crest, this wave of, this is nice. We're listening to this Jesus, and he's telling us things that we haven't heard before, and oh, that's good. But things are turning. You see, the established church, they're starting to hear about this itinerant preacher that is causing a lot of trouble. And Jesus even alludes to it, that he knows, he understands that they've got to put a stop to it. He tells his followers, it's getting ready to get messy. So what do? They go up to the top of the mountain where they're having worship. That's really what they're doing. They're going up there to pray. They're going up there to be away from the street just a little bit, bringing their brokenness, but coming to that mountaintop. And what happens? Now, I don't know that I thoroughly believe this story literally, just in case you're wondering. I don't know what it means, but there's an image here. There's a symbolism and a truth that all three gospel writers capture the same essence, the same story. It's changed a little bit between Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But all three, even though they have different audiences, even though they have different purposes in their gospels, they capture the story. It must have been something pretty special no matter what happened. So, Jesus, before the eyes of Peter and James and John, we're told he's transfigured, that there's a change going on. His face shines. His clothes even become gleaming. I don't know what that means, but there was something they recognized in Jesus as being very different. Something was going on. And then at the top of the mountain, what happens? Moses and Elijah come. Again, I don't know what that means. It may very well mean that in Jesus, Peter and James and John saw Moses, the authority that Moses had as the giver, the bringer of the law to the people. Jesus is rewriting that law, but he's bringing the law. He's bringing what it means to be a community of faith. He's bringing to the people. And could it be that they saw in Jesus, I see Moses in you. And Elijah, the prophet. Maybe they were starting to identify that in Jesus, he was the prophet. That he had these prophetic words and these prophetic images that he was sharing. And so, right there, maybe they just saw in him. Maybe Elijah and Moses showed up. I don't know. But did you catch Peter's response? Jesus, this is so great. They were having worship. They were having a summit. A real summit. Dare I say, not like the one in Vietnam just recently, but a real summit. And what was happening was they were there. And Peter says, why don't I build some shelters, some tabernacles, some houses for us? One for you, Jesus, one for you, Elijah, one for you, Moses. You know what he's saying? Do you understand what he's saying right there? Can we just stay here? This is good. This is safe. This is secure. This is amazing. Can we just stay here? I don't blame him. You know, sometimes when we come to worship, like I said, we come kind of broken. We come empty. And sometimes it feels good just to be here. No agenda. Just let's be with each other. Let's pass the peace for the next 3 hours. Let's just hug each other. Let's just love on one another. Let's just share the grace that we have received. Share that light that dwells in us. Let's just be together. Can we just forget the world for a little bit? Let's just be here. Some days I feel like that. I don't know if you feel like that, but some days I feel like this is the best I can do. Just be right here with you. Because out there it's just too big, too messy, demands too much. Let's just stay right here. Let's build a shelter. Let's just stay. About that time they hear this voice from the clouds. Listen, it's God, of course. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Oh, that does it. Because, you see, Peter and James and John, they've been listening. They know what Jesus is all about. They know that they can't stay on top of that mountain. They know because of what Jesus has talked to them about and what he's done, that they have to go back down. They have to be in the mess of the world. They have to be right on the front lines. And yes, those dogs are going to be loosed on them. And yes, those water cannons are going to be fired on them. And they know that, and so they fall down. They're terrified. How can we do that? Jesus comes over, touches them, assures them, get up. Get up. Do not be afraid. Who we are. This inheritance to which we are born anew is one that nothing. This inheritance as a child of God who is affirmed, who is cherished, who is loved beyond measure as a gift. This inheritance of who we are is one that nothing can destroy or wither or spoil. And then we go down the hill. We go into the street. We go with that knowledge of who we are, but also why we are there. That God has sent us. God has called us. It's not our pet projects. It's not because we want to be on the front page. It's not because we want to pat ourselves on the back. It's because God has shown us this is what we must do. And so we dare to hear and feel God's presence in our life, knowing what that's going to mean. And then we walk out the door. We walk down the mountain. And we dare to face those dogs that have been loosed on us. We dare to face those water cannons that have been fired on us. We dare to be who God has created us to be. Get up. Do not be afraid.